Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and this is Vulnerability Assessment Tools and Techniques. Now, if this is your first vulnerability or threat video, please watch the free overview video. If you're not seeing the full version, you can go to expandingsecurity.com. You can also get quizzes, badges, and this mind map with all the dynamic links in it. So let's get started. The idea here is, well, there's threat agents, threats, controls, and we're really talking about the vulnerabilities up there. The threat is how, and that's the process, tactic, or technique. For vulnerabilities, now we're talking about the flaw, or this is going to be the specific instance on a particular machine. And this can be exploited or triggered by a threat. It's a potential opportunity, and so we want to stop that. Remember, there are controls that we could put in place. They're also called mitigations. That could be a device like a firewall or a process. And we're talking about the vulnerability. Well, we're talking about the vulnerability assessment process, but let's talk about vulnerability management process first. That's a proactive process. It's a continuous life cycle of assessment, which is the next thing that we're going to talk about. Prioritization, remediation, verification, and reporting. We're going to kind of mix those things into what we're talking about here because you can't say vulnerability assessment without talking about vulnerability management. But our core focus is the vulnerability assessment tools and techniques. Now, this is all going to be integrated into some sort of patch management, configuration management, or risk management process that we have within the organization. But what we're really talking about is vulnerability assessment tools and techniques, and that's reporting the weaknesses, hopefully before exploits. This is a point-in-time process. This is usually on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. A weekly basis, if you've got like zero-day exploits that are happening, it's a snapshot in time. It identifies and evaluates the weaknesses in the systems across all the different systems that we have. Anything that has a heartbeat should be tested, okay? Our outputs for this are going to be a list of vulnerabilities to the specific assets with severity scores from the common vulnerability scoring system. Now, what you want to do is when you're doing this process, if I had to go ahead and so some of you are only going to listen to the very beginning of this, for the vulnerability assessment, I want you to work toward knowing the details of a particular asset. So you can ask the question is, does it have an IP address? Like, is it turned on or off? Now, sometimes it has an IP address, but it's turned off, and we don't find that until like the next scan. Does it have open ports? Does it have an operating system? Some things are hardwired little control gates or things like that, and they may have an IP address on them, but the only thing that you can do is like turn them on and off, like a light switch kind of thing. Then you can ask the questions about, is it under management? Do we have an agent installed on it? And then we start asking questions like, is it vulnerable? Next, we want to deploy controls to it. Sometimes you can't deploy controls to it. So what you do is you do things at the network level, like you block the inbound or outbound communication from it. So you might not be able to control this asset. If it's a host under our configuration with an agent on it, we can patch it or reconfigure it, change the settings on it. So that's the process in like a really short process there. But let's expand on it just a little bit more here and talk about the vulnerability assessment process and kind of wrap around the vulnerability management process here. So we start off with defining the scope clearly, knowing what the assets are. Then we gather information about those assets. We select the tools that we're going to use in this assessment. We could use different tools at different times. Mostly if you build a process, you're going to use all of these tools, throughout that process. Then you're going to actually do the scans. You're going to figure out that you have vulnerabilities and you need to analyze and you need to make decisions about which ones to patch. If you're in an enterprise and you've got 10,000 assets and somebody says, patch them all at once, it's like, okay, let's stop business for a second. No, don't do that. Okay, we'll patch this one first in this window here and that one second in that window here. That requires us to do the analysis and then figure out what vulnerabilities go where. Then we're going to report those assessment findings. We'll validate and verify the results, usually with a second tool, unless we have a really robust tool. We'll talk about that. And then we update the asset records so that everybody knows what's going on. That's the basics of vulnerability assessment tools and techniques. I hope you'll join me for the full presentation.